Welcome to Slanted and Decanted podcast with Cara Patricia.
I'm Parker Story.
And we are the only wine-based podcast that hates talking about wine. Ladies and gentlemen and friends of the pod, I am thrilled to welcome Jane Lopes. Jane Lopes is a powerhouse of a sommelier. She will not tell you that. She's really humble, and I don't think it's imposter syndrome. I think it's class. She is a twice published author. She is a reality television star.
True. Right.
And she's an importer. She's a sommelier. What am I missing? You sing, you dance?
Neither.
Right. Shakespearean scholar?
At one point. It is fine.
Jane Lopes here from Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to Slanted and Decanted.
How's it going in the Nash? You like it?
I am almost never there. I feel like I know Nashville like less well than many other cities. Yeah, I'd say I'm on the road like 60 to 70% of the time.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yes.
What's your mortgage?
My mortgage is about $2,200.
How many bedrooms?
3.
Do you have a garage?
Yes.
Do you have a lawn?
Yes.
What's your kitchen look like? Is it big?
It's nice. It's pretty big. It's open, so it feels very airy. No, I pay much less for a mortgage than I was paying for rent in New York.
What about in Australia?
Yeah, less than
AUD's
Australia
kind of crazy,
too.
right? Is that pretty pricey?
Yeah, I mean, paying in Australian dollars, which you're also getting paid in, so it, feels about the same. But, Australia, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it feels like your basic human needs are attainable. Like it feels like rent is relatively affordable.
That would make me so uncomfortable.
Like groceries, healthcare is very affordable. Income tax is relatively low. At least in comparison to kind of what I had come from in Manhattan. And then, if you want to buy a bottle of Krug, you're spending $500 on that. But, that seems like a fair trade-off to me.
Do you think that things are so easy there because it's just a lazy culture? They don't want to grind like we do? How do you... You could never pay my rent.
The U.S. definitely is much more of a grind. Yeah, no, there's definitely, I think there is that mentality of like, there are sort of no human like universal, needs in the U.S. At least not that are being met. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's kind of like you don't have a right to live in the U.S. You have to like be killing yourself just to like scrape by.
We play on hard mode. That's how you get to super heaven.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The Australians don't play on hard mode, and you know, I think they're much better for it.
You were in Australia because you were the wine director at Attica. It's a world famous restaurant.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Attica's cool.
It's kind of impressive.
What?
It's a little impressive.
Yeah. At a time, I was the only female wine director for the 50 Best restaurant.
Wow, that's crazy.
Right. That's crazy.
Pellegrino should re-examine
I can't even
their
name
list.
49 guys.
Yeah, I mean, Attica is incredible. I have so much respect for Ben Shuri, the owner, chef. I think a great example of sort of his mentality and leadership. He had recently taken over ownership when I moved to Australia. Previously, it had been owned by someone else, and he had been the chef, but not the owner. Yep. And when I came, the cooks were typically working 9 a.m. to midnight, 5 days a week. And he was changing that so that they would work 12-hour shifts 4 days a week.
Oh.
Either 10 to 10 or noon to midnight. And, he went and he analyzed each of the dishes on the menu and how much sort of human hours went into creating those dishes, and the ones that took the most, he just cut or changed, or, the attitude wasn't, oh, we need this dish no matter what it takes. The attitude was, no, we need good working conditions no matter what it takes.
See, I like that. I like that idea of like, no matter the cost of labor, like being taken out, because here it feels like no matter the cost of labor, we'll just pay them less. Yeah. Whereas there it seemed like, oh, I want to save on labor, so let's cut the dish that takes so much labor.
Yeah. Well, and even so many of those fine dining restaurants, have unpaid labor in their kitchens.
Yeah, of course. Stages.
So it's just a different environment, and it forces you to be a bit more creative, really, because you can't have these massive teams. And I think the best dishes, the best ideas are born out of some sort of pressure, that you can't just have unlimited resources.
Yeah, I like that.
This is just a broad stroke or a question about your general philosophy of wine. But what do you feel like you brought to Attica with you, and what do you feel like you left with?
So, I think coming in, I obviously am American, and I was really sort of like wide-eyed, bushy-tailed about being able to discover Australian wine. And the list, was much more European dominated when I came in. And I was like, this is a restaurant that really celebrates first and foremost Australian culture and ingredients and cuisine. Like, our list should not only be really Australian, but even like really Victorian, like the state we were in. And it's interesting is Ben Shuri, the chef, he's from New Zealand. So he kind of had a similar perspective when he moved to Australia. He's been in Australia for decades now, but he kind of, as an outsider, was able to say, you have this amazing natural bounty here, and yet a lot of the fine dining restaurants are wanting to be French or Italian, And so sometimes it takes that outsider's perspective to be like, well, you might think this is old hat, or you might think it can't be that exciting because it's your own backyard, but actually this is really great, and we should embrace really Australia.
I don't think I've ever in my life experienced, outside of the wine, I've never experienced Australian culture other than the wine I've had or the media I've seen, because there's no like Australian fine dining. There's Australian chefs that move here, but they're not like, we're making Australian fine dining. Like, I have no idea what's going on. What is like Australian fine dining? Yeah, it's a melting pot country
for sure. I think if you're I think Attica is probably the best example of like kind of pinnacle Australian fine dining. In that, it really embraces Australia, and there are plenty of amazing fine dining restaurants in Australia, but that aren't as committed to being Australian, And so I think that meant for Ben both, ingredients, and there's a lot of native ingredients, things you never ever heard of, like lily pilly and lemon aspen and red fruited curjong, and like all these really cool, like, this native produce and herbs and spices and that sort of stuff. A lot of seafood that's unique to Australia. Kangaroo, of course.
Okay.
We never had pork or steak or anything like that on the menu.
Really?
Yeah.
What were the main proteins?
Marin was almost.
What's marin?
Marin is it's lobster.
Okay.
But
it's crustacean.
Yeah, it's crustacean.
Game birds are popular too, right?
Yes. I don't know. Yeah, like we would have, I don't know if they're considered game birds, but
I guess
like you would have like emu, like
in the bush,
an emu
those are just birds.
Dessert.
Yeah.
There's a lot of camels in the middle of the country, like over 1 million camels. So even though they're not native to Australia, we did like a camel milk dessert ones.
What?
Kangaroo would almost always be as a tartare. He would do raw kangaroo.
But like kangaroos are like kind of hopping around. Like you see them in the wild.
You do. Oh, absolutely. If you
So
go,
it's like eating like a squirrel, in that sense of just like you just see them around.
Yeah. And that was actually the one dish, because they were caught wild. They weren't farmed. That like, even if if a pregnant woman came in and she said, I don't want you to change the menu, I'll eat everything, we would say, we really recommend you don't have the kangaroo.
Why?
Because it's wild. You don't know if
like
there's
bush meat,
parasites or whatever.
No.
I mean,
They gamble, they're bad fathers, they smoke cigarettes.
Eating a kangaroo. It's like eating like a human. It feels like eating an orangutan or something.
Yeah. I mean, I did it a lot.
What does it taste like?
It's very lean. Ben would never cook it because he thought it got too like chewy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always raw.
I just think of like kangaroos to me just feel like tough little rugby players.
They kind of look exactly like that.
Yeah. Like swole guys with like a height complex that just want to fight you and are running around, and like the idea of eating them, and like that's cannibalism. It's not though, because they're not. That's too close to home.
Magnificent creatures.
Huh?
Yeah, and if
They're
you
crazy.
Go,
I
if
mean,
you go
they're
visit Australia,
very
you go
interesting.
out to a wine region, you will see kangaroos. Potentially lots of people. Yeah.
When I was in Peru, I went to meal up in in the Sacred Valley, and we had one of my dishes was a alpaca like stew. It was so good, but then I couldn't finish it in the course because I was just like I just saw you in Machu Picchu and you're so fucking cute, and like you're just like this big happy animal that I had a connection with. I cannot eat any more of this.
I mean, the good thing is kangaroos like look kind of mean, so you're not going to be like, I want to cuddle with you.
Really? Oh my God. I'm big into kangaroo Instagram. I will 100% get mauled to death if I ever go to.
Is there like a kangaroo TikTok?
Yeah, it's
Kangaroo
mostly
videos
like
are
mean kangaroos, but love it.
But yeah, so it was all that, and then also some like kind of a little bit more like sort of what you could call like Australiana, like kind of culturally Australian foods, like sort of an upscale take on a meat pie, or pavlova or stuff like that.
Did you get to experience like any Aboriginal foods?
I mean, I guess a lot of the the kind of native ingredients are very much considered, and several of the main companies who provide those ingredients are Indigenous owned, which is great. I think it's harder to identify like an Aboriginal like cuisine.
Yeah.
And there were over 500 First Nations in Australia. So it's also probably hard to like homogenize across all of them when they probably each had different kind of foods and
similar, I think, in the States where Indigenous Americans speak regularly about how their foodways are not necessarily transmutable into, these modern methods of conveyance of food, the way that we do it. It's like, well, an indigenous restaurant, conceiving of that, for some of these people, it's like, well, what?
Yes. That's not the
food,
way that food is introduced in that world.
It is totally, I think, transformed from and this isn't to, blanket anyone's culture, but from the regenerative and sustenance focus that people in those times and those places used food. The ways in which they use food, I think, were more focused on.
It's starting to happen more here too, because there is that Berkeley restaurant that's Olone.
That was
and
what was on my
mind.
Yeah.
In Arizona, outside of Phoenix, is well known. It's like a very like high end.
They've received a lot of press because, and kind of through that prism, being like, this is actually very interesting that it's been able to be conceived of in this way that, in the biz, order fire, fine dining, pairing beverages, all of this stuff that those cuisines have maybe not ever seen that treatment.
Amazing.
Listeners, viewers, we're talking about Australia because Jane just wrote a book about Australia.
Oh, yeah. And I would put it up and hold it up, which was the plan. However, we sold out of them.
We sold all of them
We
tonight.
sold out. It's called How to Drink Australian by Jane Lopes and Jonathan Ross, her husband, and such a great friend of Decant.
Cara mentioned earlier that this is Jane's second book. So twice published now, and I'm really excited to dig into it. I've read a good amount of Vignette. I did want to ask you, having read just portions of Vignette and not, well, I cracked open How to Drink Australia a little bit earlier. You're a Renaissance literature scholar, correct?
Yeah, scholar might be a strong word, but that is what I studied as my, undergraduate focus.
Oh,
Before one.
do you think that there are any trace elements of your education there that appear in your research for your wine writing?
100%. I went to University of Chicago, which, I have a great affection for. I think it's a really wonderful school in a lot of ways. I think it really taught me how to think and think analytically and think critically. And, there was sort of a high level expectation for writing quality there. And even if you weren't studying writing, it was, a large focus of what we did. I think what I really like to do and what I did in both my books in different ways is kind of string together narratives. And, in Vignette, it was often kind of finding the narrative centering around a beverage or a specific bottle in each little, vignette. It was these little chapters. And for How to Drink Australian, that was kind of taking these facts about a region, whether it's historical facts or, terroir elements, and, creating a narrative that answered sort of the questions of why do we care, and I definitely credit the work I did in college with helping me think sort of analytically in that way. So absolutely, I think for a while it looked like my expensive education was not going to prove itself to be useful, but yes, I feel it has.
What do you think the most spiritual style of wine is?
Ooh, most spiritual style of wine.
Dear.
It's interesting. I would definitely not describe myself as a spiritual person, but I think that's probably because I often associate spirituality with religion, and I'm very much not a religious person, but I know that it is not that. And I do think I've actually, survived some hard things in my life. And the way I think about myself and my journey, if you will, in the world, that can definitely be very much like a spirituality, a genre of spirituality. I guess my answer would be whatever you're drinking today. I think all wine can be spiritual and cerebral, and I think the podcast we just recorded speaks to that, and I think it can really bring people together. And for me, it's funny, and Vignette is a testament, but it's I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday morning, but I can tell you the bottle I was drinking when this thing happened.
Yeah.
And for me, wine has really helped punctuate my life in that way, and helped in some ways give it meaning. I think even in my darkest times, hardest hours, I had found something in my life that I really connected with, and that was a great source of passion and interest. I remember in high school and college, I kept feeling when am I going to find that thing that is my thing and that I'm passionate about, and finding that in wine, I think makes a lot of, the other stuff worth it, just knowing you have this thing that really, that you just really connect to. So yeah, I think all of it maybe is my answer.
Sounds pretty spiritual to me, dude.
That's such a hard thing of like when you find, I don't know what it is about wine. Maybe a little bit of it is the fact that it helps you get inebriated. But I do feel there's something about like the pursuit of academia in wine, which really is what it is. It is an academic pursuit. Like it makes me feel closer to like, honestly, like early civilization. Like it makes me feel like I could slide into ancient Greece, or I could slide into ancient Rome and just be able to like sit there with like philosophers and be able to like talk, because all they were doing was like drinking wine and thinking about the universe.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other beverage in the world, certainly not coffee, maybe tea, maybe peyote, but like that's going to make you actually kind of think a little bit on, I mean, maybe not a spiritual scale, but like on a universal scale, like what is going on?
You know, the Zoomers on TikTok, they have this practice called shifting where they will go into their minds and like go to different periods of history and then things, and then they'll come back and be like, I just talked to Socrates. He's actually a dickhead. It's really crazy. But maybe you should get into it
Is that
and see
Second
if you...
Life? I played that when I was in my
No,
20s.
it's I think it's like an actual LARP where these kids are like they're doing kind of a collective internet live action role play where they experience history but using their imaginations. It's really quite creative.
Good for them. And they're canceling people from ancient times.
Yeah, Alexander the Great,
Oh,
Napoleon.
totally.
Don't even think
Misogynist.
about
He was
it.
not a feminist at
Yeah.
all in any way, shape, or form. Like Pliny the Elder. Hi,
Yeah.
name one woman in your book.
Curiously,
A
Canceled.
lot of people
Yeah.
could be canceled.
um,
But wine can like take you back. You know?
Yeah.
My husband just turned 40 and like I got some 1983s, and it's like it's crazy to think that these grapes were picked the
Right.
year you were born.
that is very it's
Yeah.
it's
It
odd.
does. It is the only beverage that I feel like you really can taste. It's time traveling.
Yeah.
It's like looking at old photographs. Like you can go back and if you really think about it, you can go back in time, because not only are you tasting the evolution of the grape, which is the wine, excuse me, the evolution of the wine, which is almost birth your wine as a trip. And it's almost like thinking about the evolution of your soul
Yeah.
or your body or whatever you think of it.
Slanted and Decanted is brought to you by The Bottle Cult, a curated wine club by Decant San Francisco. Join the cult at decantsf.com and get $10 off your first subscription box. Promo code SLANTED.
Jane, so much of your studies before wine deal obviously heavily with the past, and vintages and times gone past are a huge part of the wine world as well. What period of time do you find the most interesting if it's not the Renaissance? I guess from a wine perspective.
I feel like the 80s in Australia would be really cool.
Tell me.
Um,
Like I'm thinking, all I think of that when you say that is like Olivia Newton-John and like blonde guys with surfboards.
I mean, all of that would be really fun. But it was also, it was really sort of a Renaissance moment for Australia. And I think not to like harp on the Renaissance thing, and I think they're going through another one now, but I think that was a time where there was just a lot more awareness of cool climate wines and non-fortified wines, and like just a lot of like energy and momentum towards like planting vineyards and tending them by hand, and making small batches of wine, like all the things we kind of value.
Sort of like the Renaissance of like the modern Australian wine. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's like when Margaret River started getting planted. I feel
Yeah.
like in the early 80s.
70s, but like
okay.
but yeah, I mean, like kind of, just a little like trickling. And then I think 80s is when you saw a lot of those regions become more robust. You saw regions that didn't really have much going on, really kind of have a first graced.
Yeah.
So that would be really fun. And a lot of like, the producers that we've researched and written about and studied, seeing kind of the infancy of that sort of stuff will be pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it'd probably be pretty interesting to go back to a lot of different places and times, but that one definitely came to
No.
mind.
That's cool.
In reading your new book briefly, I realized, well, I stumbled across the Clare Valley subsection, or I guess section. I didn't realize that there were, caves, vineyards, like 1852, as early as that. In my, I guess, limited scope, and I think like a lot of people in the biz, or just hobbyists, Australia being in the periphery, don't think about that time period. Um, I always think about Australia as, New World or Nouveau, and maybe not just because the containers come a little bit later in the year, but because it had been years of me, drinking and thinking before I got acquainted with any sort of Australian styles. You mentioned in that section the wines of Damon and John O'Connor, which are really, really cool, fresh wines that I think is my favorite producer out of that area right now. Who else is making really cool stuff in the Clare, and just what are you super excited about out of Australia right now?
There's just a lot of people. I mean, it's really, when we moved over there, we were just kind of like shocked, because John and I both were working with medicine Peric, and we were both, studying for and taking our Master Sommelier exams. And, we were very studious sommeliers, and so you kind of think, especially living in New York, I feel like you kind of feel like, well, if there's something worth having, it's here.
For sure.
Surely I've tried it.
And,
Yeah.
So we kind of felt like, oh yeah, there's a few cool things going on in Australia, whatever, and we just were absolutely blown away by just like the sheer quantity of great wines being made in Australia, and stuff we'd never considered being able to bring from Australia. And we have about 30 producers in our portfolio. If we had like the demand and it made financial sense, we could easily double that number tomorrow, exclusively with producers we thought were
Wow.
amazing, and we were super excited about that. Have never been in the U.S. before.
That's like the big problem, right? It's like how do you create the demand for something people don't know exists?
It's very hard.
Oh, that's why you write a book. But
100%.
that is part of why you write a book, and that's why you have to we all know that in our industry, education is key, right? Like, I'm only going to start caring about sherry if I have the resources to learn about and the exposure to understand all the different nuances of sherry. To be able to pick a wine on our list, it's like, yes, this is an Amontillado. No, it is not made from Palomino Fino. Yes, it is made from Pedro Jimenez, and it is completely dry. Like, all of those sort of things, you have to be able to be exposed to something that's outside of the norm, the standard that you learn, to be able to bring that in. And I feel like in the US, we are very much based on the standard that we see and that we have, which are a couple dozen producers, many of which are fucking fantastic and incredible. However, are the stalwart classics of yore, and we have no idea about everything else that's coming out. And that's why California wine, if you go to France, if you go to anywhere else, you want to bring something, bring them a California wine that they've never had any idea existed. If you're going to Italy, bring them a Barbera from Mendocino. They have no idea that exists, because there's no way that's ever going to make its way over to Europe. And so for you to bring those types of, it's like you are bringing to the States, you are bringing the bedrocks, you are bringing the Literais, you are bringing these producers that are so amazing and small, and you're finally bringing them over here for us to taste, because nobody else is going to put the time and effort into doing that.
No, I mean, I think it's like business school 101. Like, it's much easier to create a product that supplies existing demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Than try to generate demand for something people don't know that they don't say they need or want. But that's what the business we've chosen. And we really believe in these wines and these people, and we believe that the U.S. should have a more complete picture
Yeah.
of what's going on in Australia.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, for the book, we really felt like, how can we expect people to create great Australian wine programs if they don't have any way into learning about
Yeah.
Australian wine?
Absolutely.
And
It's crazy, the stuff that's like, we'll have the most obscure wines from these teeny tiny little bullshit areas in the Loire Valley that, like, to the point where, like, the producers are rising up and be like, we're not in the Loire, we're in the Loire Volcanique. And now I
Yeah.
know what grapes are grown in the Loire Volcanique, but I have no idea, like, what is new in the Margaret River.
yeah, totally. No, it's really, I mean, it's really a shame. It's such a, like, it's just such an incredible wine producing country. And, you know, there are whole regions that are super important in Australia that the US just sees zero wine from. And
Like what?
well, this was Beechworth was like the region that like convinced us kind of to import wine, because we were like, it was the first region we visited together. It's up in northeastern Victoria and like sort of the Victorian like Alps, really.
Okay.
And you know, amazing high quality. Every you know, great wine list in the country is going to have Beechworth wine on it. It's not large, but you know, most of the wine is also not big in the country. And there wasn't, until our portfolio, there was not a single Beechworth producer in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that is like the sort of, people always say that cliche, like, be the change you want to see in the world. And like, you're literally like, okay, we're going to like change the way that we see Australian wine in our world. Because even if you think of the institutions like the WSET, Masters of Wine, Court of Master Sommeliers, like, from what I understand, I haven't gone through the master's part yet, but from everything that I understand is like, in those exams, especially now, the people that are writing the tests, they're keeping up with the times. So you kind of got to get some of the new books. You kind of got to start understanding what the new classics are. And I think that your book, especially because it was named as an essential wine book of 2023 by the New York Times, I think that will be something where, moving forward, exams for sommeliers are probably going to have a nice big feature on Australia, because now there's a resource that everybody can access. And now there's an importer where you can start finding these wines. Let's say 5 years, you know, down the line, 10 years down the line, 100%, if you guys keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't.
It's not just going to be Yalumba and Penfolds and Pusey Vale.
Yeah. You were, you know, I think sort of the main questions right now, or at least questions I remember getting on my exams, were either very much GI questions.
Yeah.
You know, like, what are the 5 GIs of the Port Phillip Bay zone? You know, stuff like that, or like, what's the famous soil type of Heathcote? You know, like, to a certain extent, they're sort of basic questions, and that doesn't mean that they're not important to know, but like, you definitely see a lot deeper level for Italy, France, even the US. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that that would be really good. I think an evolution of the wines tasting from Australia would be really important. You know, it's pretty limited right now, and it's honestly oftentimes very commercial styles. Instead of kind of the most qualitative, you know, styles. So yeah, I mean, our hope is certainly that all of that evolves.
You're going to make it happen.
So on the podcast, we have a segment called Drink It or Dump It. We bring up different topics and decide if we're drinking it because we like it or dumping it because it sucks. So, in the general scope of wine and this culture, this thing of ours, what are you dumping for 2023, and what are you drinking in 2024 Any trend predictions?
You can't say Australian wine because that's an obviously drink it
Okay.
2024.
Well, I'd say I would like to continue with the trend of alternative packaging.
Ooh, I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think we haven't found the perfect thing, but I think we have to get more great wine. I mean, it's like expensive wine, but into sort of alternative packaging, make it easier to have just a glass, that sort of thing. I think it's actually called Just a Glass. There's a company in Australia who does these kind of pouches of wine, and they get great wineries. They have somms curate packs of them. It's like a great idea. I love that.
Like an anaerobic pouch of wine, like milk in a bag.
I don't know what milk in a bag was.
Oh, I didn't know if I didn't know if
I don't know about milk in a
Australians
bag
also,
either. Did
That's a
that come to you in
Canadian
a
thing. I
dream?
thought maybe it was like just a Commonwealth thing.
Yeah.
Milk in like,
Like
yo, you know, like
Canadians
milk
do
in a
it. Do they do
bag.
it in Australia. Okay, so a pouch like with like a almost like a Tetra Pak, but like a pouchy thing.
Yeah. And it just, I mean, I think it probably has like $250.
Yeah.
Maybe less. But I think there's a lot more potential to kind of explore for how we can package wine that makes it easier to consume variable amounts of it.
I agree
Yeah.
with that. How do you feel about like the Coravant? Like we're on here at Decant, we use the Coravant Pro, which is like you actually take out the cork and you put in this different little cap, and then you have this, it's not so much a needle as much as like a tube that goes in and it pours out really quickly, like an ounce a second.
Yeah.
And that's great, obviously, for wine bars. And it's way easier to use than the old Coravant that would like break all the time. But, you know, it's for a person to buy that for their house, that's like
Yeah.
$300 with
$300.
capsules.
The argon stretches a lot farther in the Pro model too.
I'm
That it's-
Because
yeah.
they're
Because I
big.
feel like that's a main call.
Yeah, I still use a needle in the market, you know, for wholesale work, and I mean the gas prices are literally killing me on two fronts because I'm like, it feels pretty post-apocalyptic. I'm like going to the gas pump and giving somebody $7 a gallon for my petrol, and then I go to the wine hardware store and I'm like, yeah, man, I need some more argon. I'm giving this guy like $140. He's like, here you go, and I'm like, this is the end of the world. Like I'm just loading up my argon.
But like that is something that has helped, I think, the premium market be able to enjoy things in different. Well, it definitely helps us at shops like this. Is there any like win that could be like a mass marketed thing, or it has to be packaging?
Yeah, we gotta maybe put some wine in some kangaroo skins or something. Figure it out.
You know, it's kind of my thought that there could be like a so much countertop appliance, like Eric style, something that you could. So it's bag-in-box technology, but the box is a nice appliance on your counter.
Yeah.
And it can dispense wine at the perfect temperature, and you can use it to buy 3-liter bag of something, and you use it to buy 187 ml bag of something if you want to try a first grade Bordeaux, but you can't afford a full 750 ml bottle.
I think that's great. The packaging obviously would have to be compostable because we can't add more plastic, right, to the ocean.
Yeah.
That would be the ideal scenario.
That was my idea was always like for I thought bag in the box technology was the perfect thing for natural wine producers that don't use sulfur, because like you need something that's going to have absolute zero oxygenation whatsoever.
Well, don't
that
ask
you
those
can
guys to get
then-
innovative. They'll just
What's
give
that?
up. I said, don't ask those guys to get innovative.
I know. And then like, okay, we used to sell 9-liter or 13-liter sherry boxes.
Whoa.
And because when we opened, like
13-liter?
I think they were 13-liter. They're huge boxes. We put them in the bottom
Did
of
anyone
our
who
low
bought
boy.
one survive?
Yeah, dude. But it was just a big box because like 13 liters is not that big in a cube. It's huge in a weird shaped bottle. And like we would sell them to our customers too. And some of them they would have it like at their house,
Just
in like
drinking
their
Fino
fridge.
out of the
And that
cube?
was just, yeah, they'd buy like their fucking leg of
Yeah.
jamon and their 13-liter box of
That's
sherry.
crazy.
It's like Hidalgo, like the Cigarrera stuff.
Mhm.
And whatever. It was great. It was cool, whatever. But I was like, this would be perfect for natural wine because you don't want it to get exposed to oxygen. It can just slimly fit in there. And you make it all compostable. and like find some really good packaging that's compostable for the bladder. And like, there you go. Bada bing, bada boom. Natural wine's good again.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good for really all wine that is, meant to be consumed within a couple of years. And I'm not super knowledgeable in technology, but I don't think it's like the wine's going to go bad after a few years, but just it's probably not going to evolve in the same way.
I mean, I think people thought the same thing about Stalvins.
Sure. And that's incorrect. So yeah.
I think the only thing that it's the same as anything is just temperature and light.
I like the countertop idea. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely I don't think that's a trend we should move on from. I just think it's a trend that we need to hone and kind of make better and find ways to put really high quality wine and
It's even like those Eurocabs and stuff that you can get. Sometimes you see them at restaurants, and sometimes you lay them at home. Like those things fail really easily.
If you're out there, you're viewing and listening, and you're one of those tech guys who's like, man, this culture's super boring. I want to become a sommelier. Stop right there.
Yeah.
Get to innovating. We need sustainability. We need technology.
Sommeliers as co-founders.
Maybe there's like a little buoyant
Disrupt
sensor
that fucking bullshit
inside the bag.
Yeah.
It sends a signal to your Neuralink when it's out of wine.
Yeah. Stop trying to figure out how to tip us in crypto.
Yeah.
And start figuring out how to make
Exactly.
Start figuring out how to make earth-friendly ways to make wine taste great over time.
Yeah.
God.
Keep doing science. We've got enough people working on the floor right now.
Why don't we do science?
This is science. Podcasting is science.
They're all going to steal our ideas. Someone's going to get rich.
Jane?
You're the best.
If someone can steal that idea and make it, there's already a few things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Patent office.
Yeah.
There are a few things in that sort of genre that are happening, but I don't think anyone has quite nailed it yet.
My homeschool education, like for years as a child, I believed, I was like, well, one day I'll make a fabulous invention. I'll take it to the patent office and then I'll be rich and that'll be that.
Not too late.
Well, how many ideas did you have? And you're like, how do I make a patent? What do you mean I need figures? How do I figure out how to...
Yeah, is there a patent app? Still talking to you guys. Put it in the phone. Just put it in the phone. Take a
I bet
picture of it.
Adobe
This is
has
mine.
that. Jane, you're incredible.
You're pretty amazing. And you're a great podcast guest in addition to...
One day I hope to hang out with you that doesn't have something to do with work.
I know, it has always been that for a while.
But that's the problem with working in wine and everybody being in wine is it's like, well, you can't have free time.
Well, continue your globetrotting.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for
Thanks to
stopping
your
by
candor.
No,
San Francisco.
And you got to listen to, well, Jane, what do you got to plug?
Nothing right
You
now.
have, okay, first of all, you have a ton to plug. You have a book.
Okay, yes.
You got a
book.
pod.
Pod.
Come on.
Okay, so
You have an import book.
recorded the kind of proto episode for the podcast tonight. The plan is for it to be called Winers, and these fine folks for my first guests. So hopefully that is out and in full force by the time you're listening to this. There is a book that is in fact out called How to Drink Australian. You should read it. You should drink Australian wine. My business, Legend, imports Australian wine. We're at on Instagram at Aus Wine Legends, AUS Wine Legends. That's it. That's all I got.
That's all you got? I have a quick question about, real quick, and this is tying into us all leaving.
It's 11 p.m. here, which may not sound late, but I'm...
Real quick question. What's the best way to buy your book so you get the most money?
See.
So there are 3 ways to buy the book. Well, there's probably more than that, but these are the 3 we recommend. You can, if you go and we list these 3 on our website.
Yes.
There's a website for How to Drink Australian. It's howtodrinkaustralian.com. Very easy. You can buy a book from us. We will ship it from our house in a hand-labeled package through the U.S. Postal Service.
Okay, that's the only way to do it.
It'll be signed and personalized. You can put your personalization in.
That's the only way.
Pay full price for that.
The $60 plus shipping.
Plus shipping, plus tax.
Worth it.
But you will get a signed book, and we will get we will get the retail margin. There is if you would like to go through online retailers, that is not terrible for us. That helps the algorithm and all those things to get people to find it. So don't feel guilty if you could feel guilty for other reasons for using Amazon, but you don't have to feel guilty on the author's behalf.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. Go to your local wine shop or bookshop and ask them to order it for you. Because then you expose a potential wholesaler to the book. So that's also really good. So pretty much any way you go about it is good for us.
I have to say that your book, How to Drink Australian, a essential wine book by Jane Lopes, essential modern wine book by Jane Lopes and Jonathan Ross, is the second book that we've sold here, like actually sold here, and we sold out of both of them. It was yours and the Tinned Fish book that we sold out yesterday,
alongside the Tin Fish cookbook.
Yeah,
That's a all shop farmer and cook.
Listen, the future is bright. We appreciate it.
Other small batch books on the way, and more podcasting from the Slanted and Decanted pod. You can find us on YouTube
And whiners.
at youtube.com/slanted and decanted.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you.
You for being here. Thank you for letting us do this. Thank you for buying us dinner.
Anytime.
Thanks for bringing us cute wine. Thanks for us being drunk and our teeth being purple.
I know. I feel like this is actually the best time to do podcasts. Like, I feel like I'm a little more delirious and honest than I would normally do.
Warm up is organic.
Couple of hours to your flight. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.